Margaret. We'd like to start by thanking the BCS and yourself for inviting us to give this keynote today. We're very excited to be here and to talk about this new phenomenon of digital decarbonisation. So Tom and I are professors at Loughborough Business School, Loughborough University. Tom's background is information and knowledge management, and my own is within organisational strategy and specifically decision making. And together we've pursued this new exciting area, really, which we call digital decarbonisation. It started early in 2022. We were doing an awful lot of work with different organisations, and it became very evident just how much data was being generated by these firms. And not only the amount of data, but also their inability to really, I suppose, cope with the data that was coming in. Now, concurrent to that, obviously, we have the big net zero agendas across governments across the globe. And Tom and I started to brainstorm this idea around, okay, well, we know there's a cost of poor data and knowledge management, just in terms of people's time, for instance. But is there an environmental cost attached to data, and specifically to digital data? And at that point in time, there was really nothing mentioned about the environmental cost of data. And this is where digital decarbonisation was really born. We started to progress that narrative around digital data. Digitalisation is absolutely an important and valuable tool to net zero. Digital initiatives have proven to be incredibly important. But do we also need to recognise there might be another side to reflect on? So in some of our early works, we introduced digital decarbonisation really as the point that upon gathering digital data, processing it, using it, we also need to be cognizant of the CO2 that might be attached to it. And this early work was recognised by the World Economic Forum, who identified ourselves as being the pioneers of digital decarbonisation. And really our fundamental aim is to spread awareness of the need for digital decarbonisation, what it is. It is a bit of a tongue twister, so it does sometimes take a bit of time to really come to terms with what it actually comprises. And as we progress this stream of work, the OECD OPSI, which is the Observatory for Public Sector Innovation, identified digital decarbonisation as one of 4 critical future focus areas to accelerate the path to net zero. And this was one of the first significant recognitions, I suppose, of the true importance of digital decarbonisation. It really helped to validate our early thinking that, yes, it absolutely needs to be looked at, and we need to be addressing it now, because as we move further forward into the future, it's going to become increasingly important and potentially also damaging to the environment. So it's something that we have to address. So that's a little bit about us. In today's keynote, we're focusing very much on what underpins digital decarbonisation, the setting, and really what can we as academics contribute, and importantly, how can theory be guiding practice towards this very hopefully positive future where digital decarbonisation becomes a priority for organisations and governments across the globe.
Thanks, Ian. Good morning, everyone. Good to well, I actually can't see you, but it'd be nice to see you. But good morning to everyone. So let's start right at the very beginning and think about data. And it's all around us, isn't it? If you think about our mobile phones, our Zoom call today, we're generating data, or we're using CPU time, or we're using networks. But what's the impact of that on the environment? And like Ian said, back last year, we thought about, is there any environmental damage from the data we generate? And the answer is yes. So as we go forward through the academic work we're going to present today, just have that in the back of the mind and think about where it actually comes from. So if we look at the next slide, you can see here, this is everything that happens in a minute throughout the day, throughout the world. So here on the right-hand side, this is focused on the right-hand side of the screen for the moment. These are the sort of things that are going on throughout the world every minute. So 5.7 million Google searches. And just think about that. So to do a search, we obviously think it's quite easy, don't we? You type it in and it comes back with all the results. But to do that, we're using network, so they need to be powered. We're using some CPU time on our own machines and also at the server. It's then going through lots of stored data to find the results. Yes, it's cached, but it still has to be stored. So we start to actually think about the volumes of data, the level of energy that is required to keep our infrastructure running. And you think about ChatGPT nowadays, wow, I mean, goodness me, the amount of data that's required to train the algorithm that's behind ChatGPT is colossal and has a massive impact on the environment. So don't get us wrong. We're not saying, let's finish computing, let's tear down all the data centers and data lakes around the world. We're not saying that. We're just saying, we need to raise an awareness that there is a footprint associated with data. And we can actually go in, and we will do throughout the talk, about some of the areas where we can start to reduce our digital carbon footprint. Now, this is where I think it really comes to light. If we look on the left-hand side, we're talking about the footprint of data centers, data warehouses, data lakes. So their global carbon emission, so all the data centers in the world, is between 2.5 and 3.7% of global carbon emissions. Just think about that, 3.7%. Put that into context, it's only 2.1, let's go for the lowest, let's be generous, 2.1% is generated from aviation. So we keep saying, stop flying, let's not fly anymore, you should go green. Yeah, we're right. But we don't even have that conversation when it comes to data and trying to think about being a bit greener. So you could argue, oh, that's rubbish. You know, we're saving huge amounts of carbon by not getting collectively in a room somewhere, maybe in London today, from all over the world. Yeah, correct. But there are instances of what we do in our daily lives that we can start to reduce the data. So there's 2.5 quintillion bytes of data produced every day by an organization or organizations around the world. Now, I've got no idea what really 2.5 quintillion bytes is. Well, let me put it into some context. It's 1,000 petabytes. Let's go, oh, that's good. What's that then? So that's equivalent to 11 million movies being created every day. And just to put it in this context, there's only 500,000 movies out there in the whole of the world. I'm talking about the blockbuster movies, not the ones on YouTube that's self-creation nowadays. So to store 11 million movies, and let's go back into some old architecture, old data storage units. Let's talk about DVDs. So it's 213 million DVDs are required to store 11 million movies. And we're generating that every day. So like Ian says, the growth is massive because we keep on generating. Data is doubling every 2 years. So although we're worried about some of the CO2 impacts of other industries, the data industry is going to be the biggest one to tackle over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's why we're trying to push our work forward at the moment to start to raise that awareness. So let's bring it into some sort of context. We've all got a mobile phone. We all like taking photos, don't we? And we all have some sort of backup system. So we take a photo and then it's stored on our own computer or it's stored on our own mobile phone. But also it's probably backed up to iCloud or Google Photos or Amazon Prime Photos. So in the UK, on average, we all take 5 photos a day. And if we work out what the carbon impact of that is, it's a huge amount of carbon being generated each year. So it's the equivalent, I can give you that figure, it means nothing, but it's the equivalent of flying from London Heathrow to New York 934,000 times a year. But there's some saving grace. If you think about the UK, we're not overly keen on taking photos compared to, believe it or not, and they are the leaders, the US, who take 20 photos a day. 20 photos a day, which you think, oh, that's nothing, is it? 20 photo days, that's absolutely nothing. But the impact in terms of the carbon generated from taking those photos. So you take a photo, it goes into a data center, data lake, or data warehouse, it's stored, but it's not stored once, is it? Because we all know in computer science, it's backed up, and it can be backed up to 7 times. And then on top of that, you've got what we call dark data. And we'll come on to that on the next slide. So to offset the photos we take, it would cost $10 billion. $10 billion to offset all the US photos a year. So when you start putting a monetary value to it, obviously industry are very interested in this because they're looking to save money. So what is the data problem? We know from the UN Chief Secretary that at the recent COP conference, he said, we're on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator. I think he's absolutely right. You know, we think about trying to reduce our carbon footprint, and we're not saying data centers are bad because they're very green. Some of them are very green because they've got solar panels, they've got wind. That's good. We're getting there. But the issue is I would say information governance. So within a data warehouse, 65% of the data we store, sorry, checking loads of numbers at you, but just remember, 65% of the data we store is dark data. This is data that may be used once or never at all. Think back to our photos that we take. How many duplicates do we keep of our photo? We take like 5 of the same image or scene, and we probably don't delete them. And how often do we go back and actually use them? Then think about on a global scale, organizations and all the data they're storing, and 65% of that is kind of like not worth it, not used. So you wouldn't have a warehouse, would you, if you owned an organization that had 65% of the warehouse full with stuff you're not going to use? And you certainly wouldn't have it then increase that in terms of 15% on top of that and storing stuff that is out of date. So think we've got this huge footprint, but we could reduce that massively by what we're looking at 80% reduction. So only 20% of the stuff we keep is potentially relevant. You go, oh, well, you know, it's legal things. We need to keep it because there's legal reasons. Well, that in some cases is true, but a lot of the cases it's not. And we worked with an organization recently that had 85% dark data. So if we could start to reduce that, and there's many different ways we have to do that, but it all comes around or comes about by education. We need to start this in schools because my kids are on YouTube all the time. They have no idea of the impact of watching a YouTube video is having on the environment. We need to start at universities and start organizations. So the latest graduates go into organizations and start talking about sustainability in organizations. Education is key because when we go out to organizations, at first they don't get it and they start going, we get it because we can save money. It's not about saving the planet, it's about saving money. Now on the next slide, we'll go through some of the problem areas that are causing us issues and some of the areas that we need to educate people around. Ian, did you want to pick one to start with and I'll come back to some?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom. So let's take corporate memory, or also referred to as organizational memory. So it has its roots back in Huber's learning process. So it was a key fundamental part of the organizational learning sequence. What is it? Well, corporate memory is very much like human memory. refers to organizational stocks of knowledge. Now, corporate memory has always been a challenge for organizations. So even in the 1980s, when Huber was proposing the learning process, it was difficult to ensure that organizations captured all relevant information, not just captured it, but were able to store it for purposes of reuse, knowledge reuse. You can imagine, and particularly with the numbers that Tom's shared with you, with the huge growth in data being generated, this is more and more data that's coming in to the organization. So we think about information governance. That has to be so hot in order to truly capture everything that's coming in, to codify it, to make sure it's then accessible for reuse moving forward. And we know that organizations really struggle with this. And this is one of the reasons as to why we see such a huge amount of dark data issues. We take information overload because it's a linked example. Read any textbook, any business management textbook. They are all focused principally on rational methods of management. We have things like SWOT analysis. We have different frameworks for industry level analysis. This is all a rational process. And by rational, I mean systematic, supposedly objective, where data information is used to arrive at a decision. But we also know that the human mind has its limitations. And theory refers to this as bounded rationality, which many of you will have come across. So the bounded rationality concept effectively means that we can only process so much. So suddenly we seem to have a bit of a conflict here, that as human beings, we can only process so much, yet we're generating more information than we ever have done in the past. And that's a problem because we can't process, we can't cognitively process all that data and that information. So this leads us into overload situations. So again, with overload, we know there's lots of inefficiencies, there's lots of problems associated with information overload. It could be e-waste, let alone the consequences for the individual. You know, when you feel overloaded, it's very difficult to make sensible decisions because there's just too much coming at you. So they're just two examples. And I know Tom will want to talk through some of the others with you.
Yeah, so let's take data growth and the Internet of Things down the bottom there. So yeah, we've looked at social media and the number of videos being uploaded to YouTube every 60 seconds. But the biggest growth area is the Internet of Things. So the Internet of Things, as you're probably aware, is having a chip embedded in a device that gives some real-time feedback. So I have one in my washing machine that tells you when a wash has finished. If you drive a modern car, they are full of chips monitoring things and then squirting that information back over the web into the huge databases that these organizations have. So you take Audi, for example, they have 22 SIM cards in the new modern Audi. So that is so they can process and get all that data out there and redundancy, etc. So they take all that information. Some of it will be structured, as we see on there, and some will be unstructured. So the unstructured is rarely touched, but then if you are going to touch it, then normally you have to introduce AI. So you then have to train things on AI, which then has a huge training set. And then you have to use a lot of CPU time, a lot of network time, etc. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but we should start thinking about, do we really need these sensors? So for example, Rolls-Royce in their engines have sensors, and they only get paid, Rolls-Royce engines on aeroplanes, when the actual engine is flying. So when they're actually running in the air. So they have loads of sensors. So they need to monitor the flight across, say, the Atlantic. So when it gets to the other end, say in New York, they know what maintenance needs to be undertaken, if any. But they have a number of sensors they don't even use. It's just there just in case. So the bottom right hand of your screen, you say a store it all approach. Well, let's put more sensors on. They're cheap. Storage is cheap, but it isn't necessarily cheap to the environment. And that's what we have. If you think about analogy with, I take for myself in my garden shed, I go through it and thinking, oh, I'll keep that. That could be useful. I'll keep that. That could be useful. But in reality, I don't use any of the stuff I keep. And we have that, I think, around the world, maybe obsession of keeping hold of things because it might come in useful. But that obsession is going to impact the planet. And it's, in terms of dark data, our obsession probably feeds into that dark data. Then you've got email. So every time we send an email, it's about 3 grams of carbon in every email we send. That's just sending one, but then it's stored. It's stored on our corporate services servers, so that could be in the cloud, and it's backed up, etc. So actually that 3 grams probably actually doesn't just double, probably triples up to 9 grams. And that's not 9 grams just one off for the year. That's 9 grams every year to store something. So you can start to see how storing things once is great for 1 year, but as it goes on over the years, your digital footprint grows even more. And just to finish on this slide, in terms of data duplication, so there's between 10 and 30% duplicated data around the globe. We're not talking about backups here, we're just duplicating data that already exists in another place. So already, if we think about the educational piece, we can develop software, can't we, in terms of looking for duplicates and where it's stored within the organization. Slightly harder, of course, across the web. And I get it, you might be saying, well, we need to keep it because if we try to link to a source that we're not in control of, if that source disappears, then we haven't got that data set anymore. And I get it. And it's trying to find that happy balance.
So following on from the scary numbers that we've used today so far, raises a question, doesn't it? Well, this must clearly be on the agenda of governments. It has to be, surely. Well, actually, no, it really isn't. So there's just 3 examples here: the UK, the US, and Singapore. And taking the most recent net zero strategies that have been published by those respective public administrations. Now, data features heavily, absolutely. But the way it features is data can help us to decarbonize, and that is absolutely right. And we're not refuting that at all. However, the way these strategies position data is that we need more. We need to collect more data, better data, to help make more informed decisions about where we can improve physical processes, where we can seek to make carbon savings as we pursue this aspiration really of net zero. But nowhere within policy is there mention of the recognition that these digital practices, this pursuit of gathering more and more data, has to be caveated with the recognition that we're not and can't do this for the sake of just gathering more data. We have to recognize that that on its own will have a CO2 footprint. So what the irony is that you often come across when working with different organizations across different sectors is that environmental, social and governance, so ESG, is a big priority area for many. And within that is the gathering of data and information around ESG aspects. Yet it is that data that's also creating a CO2 footprint. So digital data is not inherently good or bad, it's how we as human beings use it. And there needs to be that understanding that actually we need to be sensible and we need to be smart in what we do with the data that we gather, the data that we process and use and store. Now, from an education point of view, I'm a big believer, I think we both are, in both practice-led theory and theory-led practice. With regard to digital decarbonisation and data CO2, clearly practice cannot really inform theory because it isn't on the radar. It isn't really being recognised, certainly at the policy level. So we, as academics, have a duty to help inform and spread that awareness and educate not just our students, not just the managers of tomorrow, but also, just as importantly, those responsible for steering countries across the globe towards our ambitions of achieving our net zero targets. So there's a huge potential here for us to really make a significant contribution, and not to overestimate, but to maybe hopefully change the world to a more positive direction, again, towards this net zero target.
So how can we address the problem? And it's a chicken and egg, because you want it into policy, because if you put it into policy, organizations have to take note and have to do as they said, because they'll be regulated around the world. But it's difficult to get it into policy, and we're trying. We're working with the OECD, we're working directly with the Greenhouse Gases Protocol Group, the WRI, World Resources Institute, to try and change the policy wording there. We're working UK government to try and get it in. But the bottom line is you need to be able to measure this and come up with ways of how to actually deal with this. So, you know, part of this talk today is hopefully to inspire you to think about who you're educating, or if you're doing your PhD, can you bring a bit of this into what you're doing? Can you try and bring this on the radar of students that you're about to teach or currently teaching? Now, how we address the problem, there's a number of ways, and we've looked at, academically, we looked at two ways. One is about knowledge reuse and what we call plastic knowledge. So we generate something, this throwaway society, and then chuck it away. So all that brain power, all that thinking, collecting, all that stuff to try and come up with a solution, we see on the next screen, we just kind of throw away. And that's not necessarily good for the organization, innovation, but it's also not good for the environment. And then the other angle is the data carbon ladder. Now, we're going to go into a lot of detail on this on Monday. It's a free tool that an organization can use. We don't look at legacy data that you could. We're just talking about a new project. And we've got a lovely infographic coming up, and we'll go through that in a little bit more detail, but the nuts and bolts of it we'll go through on Monday, along with an easier tool, which we will talk about on Monday, which is the scorecard, which is a red, amber, green system. So you can use it for any new project, and it will give you a figure before you even start the project on the data sets you use, etc., etc. But we'll come on to that. So these are the two areas we've started to develop, and you probably thinking and listening to this, there's many more, and we would encourage you to start thinking about them and start adding to the body of knowledge out there, that how we're going to overcome some of the data issues that are causing CO2 to our planet. So this is knowledge reuse. So it's really embedded within the knowledge management literature, and it's thinking about how we try and solve a problem. So in the top left-hand corner, you've got a problem that comes in, and how do you solve it? So you maybe try to socialize what you're thinking with your colleagues or within yourself, and then you try to externalize it with your colleagues to try and understand what their point of view is. You might go onto the web to try and get some information, to try and get a better picture of how to solve this problem. Because solving something on your own, you always need that test, don't you? Go, am I on the right wavelength? Is this going to actually solve it? And by talking to people, that really helps. But what we're finding in many organizations is that once you've got that information and you've internalized it and think, actually, it's going to be the solution, we find that not many will put it back into the organizational memory. They won't write it up because they're on to the next project. They won't write it up and store it. You go, hang on, Tom and Ian, but that's good. They're not storing data, so they're not creating the CO2 footprint. But you've got to think about the next time they want to try and find a solution to the problem, it's probably already done. And there's the way we, I suppose, use metadata and describe stuff so it can be found again, which is a big issue. And you go, well, Tom, and Ian, this has been around for years. You're right. Information governance has been around for many a year, but we still haven't cracked it. We still cannot get that through to people. And until now, there hasn't really been a real need to do it. Yes, we're going to be more efficient. We can find information. It costs you a bit more if you don't use good information governance. You've got GDPR, all the rest of it. It's important. But now you've got an added incentive that poor information governance would lead to a bigger digital footprint. So that is the challenge we have. How do you make this area of data information governance really sexy that organizations want to actually do something about it? And we think it's from the bottom up. So if you have enough people in the organization knowing about these sort of things, thinking about, students do a lot of surface learning, don't they? And there's a place for surface learning, but we want that deeper learning. If we don't get that deeper learning and learning from what we've done before, because we're not storing it and learning from the mistakes we made, you're going to lack innovation in your organizations. We're not going to move forward as a society if we just have the throwaway society. I don't need to remember anything. I can just Google it. I can just chat GPT it. But here's a scenario for you. In years to come, if it gets expensive to store data, and we can have another keynote around this, could you envisage that you have to pay to use Google or Chat GPT to get some answers back? Potentially. And then you start to get a social divide, a social digital divide, that some people have access to information because they can afford it and some won't. And you go back to the library argument. And that's why we had libraries, so everyone can have access to information. We're not saying it's going that route, but there are many different pathways it could go, and we don't know which way it's going to go at the moment.
Thanks, Tom. So the purpose of the reuse pathways was to build on what we know in terms of established learning processes. And that was to really start that narrative around how are individuals engaging with technology to generate information, and then what they subsequently doing with it. And that's why we identified pathways to dark data, but then importantly, pathways to reuse. Obviously, organizational learning has such a rich history. There will be millions of academic articles on organizational learning. It is a cornerstone of business and management studies, and obviously outside of that, of course, information knowledge management, as well as other domains and spheres. What has emerged from that rich body of literature is a focus on the knowledge flow through the organization. And this has been described and conceptualized as absorptive capacity. I'm sure you're all familiar with that label. Absorptive capacity is the recognition that, building on the points we talked about, organizations as collections of human beings cannot process everything. Therefore, there has to be a filtering mechanism where relevant new information is extracted, irrelevant information is then lost on purpose, consciously. The filtered new information is then combined with existing knowledge stocks within the organization. And the idea is that the new relevant information, the old relevant information are combined to create new insights, new innovations that are beneficial, whether it be for commercial ends or other desirable outcomes. So as we've been developing this, of course, inevitably you say, yeah, and absorptive capacity absolutely conceptually is great. It organizes different stages of the knowledge flow through an organization, and it does help organizations understand what learning is and how they can use it. But of course, we know the learning environment now is so different from how it was when absorptive capacity was conceptualized. As Tom said earlier, data is doubling every 2 years. So this could never have been envisaged, I don't think, when absorptive capacity was first put forward, and then subsequently all those studies that have been done to examine absorptive capacity and its relevance and its role have helped to obviously make it evolve. But I think what we want to do is look into a bit more detail about what are the stages and then what does it mean for data. So in the next slide, what we've done here is just broken down the absorptive capacity process. So what the literature tells us, the academic literature, is that we really have two component elements of absorptive capacity. We have the potential absorptive capacity, and then we have the realized. Now, under the potential, the two stages, knowledge acquisition and knowledge assimilation. The reason why this is potential is because if we acquire relevant new knowledge and we assimilate it across the organization, super. That in itself, though, doesn't lead to anything. So it has lots of potential to lead to something, but on its own won't. The realize is where we then take the knowledge that's been assimilated and we transform it in some way. Often private sector wise, the transformation towards commercial endeavors, and then it's exploited in order to achieve those commercial ends. In other sectors, public and third, that knowledge transformation could be quite different. Could very much be around how do we use that assimilated knowledge to improve service X for that population within that region of the country, for instance, and then you exploit that knowledge to make it happen. Now, we know from our work that many firms really struggle just with the potential absorptive capacity element. Because they're acquiring so much, they struggle to then assimilate it. We know in many cases that whilst they might store what they perceive to be relevant knowledge, it gets forgotten. And no one even knows it exists. So therefore, because the potential absorptive capacity is failing, it can then never lead to the realized. And this goes back to our point about theory driving practice. We're starting to see more tools out there where the likes of IBM, for instance, are capturing the CO2 footprint of stored data across servers throughout the world. But that's just one aspect of what data does and where data goes through an organization. And actually, we have the luxury of building on over 30 years of knowledge that's been generated about the data journey, that many of the corporate entities, for instance, they don't have that. They don't draw on it. And we can, and we want to. It's important. So then when we think about where does data fit in, this is where we start to go from, okay, well, clearly there's a selection of the data set from whatever data zone that might be. And that'll be dictated by what the problem owner is faced with. So what is the query that they're seeking to answer, or what is the task they've been given? Clearly, then, as we start thinking about, well, what happens to that data, that new data set, how will it be aggregated? Is it going to be imported in? Is it going to be used at host, maybe through an API? And then, of course, things like the size of the data set. And that's very much within the realm of potential absorptive capacity. Then we start going into, okay, well, as we transform that data, at what rate are the updates of the data? What is the type of cadence of the data? And then ultimately we begin to get into, well, in order to exploit it, we have to be both storing it, but then using it in some way. And this is the role of analytics. So it could go from very basic descriptive reports all the way through to extremely complex AI methods. So this is born out of theory. And it is this theory that helps underpin the data carbon ladder, which we'll go into next. So what we sought to do here is take a very complex data flow as captured and as underpinned by the theory of absorptive capacity into what we hope is a more simple, understandable infographic and visual that organizations can understand. And we found that one of the big imperatives has been to change that mindset. And that's why education is wonderful, isn't it? Because that is what we're constantly trying to do. We're constantly learning, we're constantly changing our mindsets. We're constantly trying to understand phenomenon from different viewpoints and perspectives. So helping people to understand that there is a data journey. For us, informed by absorptive capacity, it starts with the selection of the data set, progress through into disaggregation of data, data size, into data velocity, data storage, and then finally at data analytics. So it's a 6-step process. And in every part of this journey, across those 6 steps, there are key decisions that have to be taken. And depending on the decisions that are taken at those various steps, there will be CO2 implications and a CO2 footprint that can be attached. And Tom's just going to add a little bit more technical detail onto this.
Yeah, so I won't add much more, Ian, because we'll go into that a lot more on Monday. So hopefully it'll whet your appetite to come along on Monday and listen to the full-blown version of the data carbon ladder. The complexities in this is trying to work out, because you can measure so much, and in the end you make it overcomplicated and people turn off. So even this with the infographic, there's a lot going on there. The complexities we had, just to give you some, the academic background to it, is around CPU time. And you think about the analytics you want to do. So it could be descriptive, predictive, prescriptive, all the way up to cognitive analytics, which you could argue is kind of like ChatGPT. All those different types of analytics, they can even call them AI, require different CPU time. And of course, there's many different types of CPU around the world. There are many different servers located in different locations around the world that all use different types of energy. So what we're not saying is this data carbon ladder is 100% accurate. No, because we could make it, but you would take probably a month to try and get your CO2 figure to be that accurate. What it gives you is a ballpark indication of, if you start a data project today, be it on a spreadsheet or sign up a database and bring in different data sets, throughout every step, we can give you a CO2 output. And hopefully by going through those steps, which we'll go through on Monday, you can start to reflect on, do I need all these data sets? Do I need all these different types of analytics, or can I just go and be very simple all the way through to where you might store it? So I think we've covered an awful lot today. So hopefully it isn't too much of information overload. I know Ian's going to finish up on this last slide. But from my point of view, and I know Ian's got his own viewpoints he'd probably want to get across, we've talked huge numbers and all the rest of it. The crux of the issue is, how do we get this more on the agenda of us academics, PhD students, and get it into universities, and get universities to start thinking about all the data they store, and get the students thinking about their social data environment in terms of TikTok, YouTube, and the impact that is having on the environment. Because it's only from the bottom up and the next generation coming through that can really push this agenda. Ian, over to you.
What we wanted to do here is just provide you with a collection of resources, of information, links to various tools to really help you to embark on that net zero data journey and to help bring others on board. That's ultimately the ambition. As Tom said, obviously we've talked about a lot of things in this presentation. Across these resources, you'll be able to dig much deeper into the themes we've talked about, and we truly hope that this will equip you and help you to really promote and push forward the net zero data agenda. So thank you so much to everyone for listening.
I think we've got some comments in the chat, haven't we? I saw that, Margaret, actually, the secretary. I looked at it, I thought, that's not how you spell secretary.
Would you like to introduce Linda, who from Ulster University? Over to you, Linda.
Yes, my name is Linda Odiambo Hooper. I'm from Ulster University, and I am presenting our work that is between I and James, who's also from Ulster University IT department. And between James and I, we've been looking at almost what I could say is the e-learning value chain of education, in education in Africa, because we have challenges from, across the chain, from policy to, right down to access and resources in the community. And so through the years, we've looked at several aspects. We started with looking at the policy aspects, and we've looked at the resources. We've looked at kind of the gender balance and challenges of this with e-learning, technology, and education. And now we thought one of the interesting aspects, and that can easily be overlooked, is the teaching of it, pedagogy. And so we thought we would kind of focus this year's work on the teaching aspect of e-learning. And then this takes us back to the impact of COVID-19 on education generally, globally, and how sections, even within countries, portions of the country were able to move online, whereas in countries, say like Kenya, which is where I come from, for maybe 80% of the students, this was not available to them because of policies not being in place, and because of resources not being in place, and because, of course, it was a crisis that emerged very suddenly, and nobody was prepared for it. The other issues that would affect teaching would be the fact that, to add on to that, is the growth of informality. So rather than kind of a steady formal evolution, there has been this steady growth of informal livelihoods. So less formal employment, more informal employment. Just it's kind of like 0 hours, but on a larger scale. And then, higher levels of poverty, which means there are no resources, and inequality. In one of the studies, we compared private schools in Kenya versus state schools, and the private schools were able to jump quickly onto e-learning platforms and educate and receive education, whereas children in state schools, and especially in the low-income areas, were unable to do this seamlessly, or if they had any, it was ill-structured and not very well delivered. And so looking at the teaching, it's, I've mentioned earlier, it's when we look at how the challenges with the teaching, we can start looking first at the way the government, the policies are structured around this. And with, when you speak to teachers, or when you read about how they're going to implement, etc., the rhetoric is there. Oh, we will use e-learning, computers, we will work on schools having computers, etc. But that is not the reality. The reality is that most schools lack the equipment, and most schools, so therefore that delivery can't even happen. And I think based on my work and all the other social science ideas that I have as a social innovation expert, there are ways of that you could actually capitalize on, even a few resources to kind of extrapolate and maybe deliver something, if there was some structure in place to do that. And so therefore we see that the policies challenge the delivery of education. But for the teachers in teacher training particularly, what we also realize is that there is, they also suffer the same problems. There is lack of resources. The rhetoric is that teacher training will incorporate e-learning and technology within within its curriculum. But alongside that is the lack of of resources and not and still resorting to the old teaching systems and graduating these teachers without having introduced them to any technology-led curriculum for them to go and apply to the students. So you see, we have there we have a serious gap and a serious problem, because how then do we expect the teachers to deliver something that they have had no experience of? Just a second, I'm having technology issues. Okay, yeah, and so because of the lack of curriculum, the lack of state incentives, the lack of when this hasn't been inculcated in their processes, in their teaching, then we see that there's resistance to change. The resistance to change from normal teaching to e-learning by teachers, because you don't know, how can you be expected to teach what you haven't learned? And besides which, even under normal circumstances, change would be resisted slightly, because you need a little bit of training and introduction to seamlessly move. And then we also see there's uneven distribution of ICT infrastructure. So maybe within the cities, there is access and experience of using technology, whereas in, say, rural areas, it might be, people might be further removed from technology. And so therefore, bridging that gap would be important. School management as well, what priorities are they setting for including technology in education? That again, challenges. It's challenged from the resources section, policies, as well as the uptake from when you don't see the use of this. And then the one interesting thing that has been occurring has been curriculum changes, and the curriculum changes are very much modern and forward thinking, and very much technology. They include talk of technology and having technology within the curriculum. But like I said earlier, there's a disconnect between what they say and what actually happens. So I mentioned the informality is growing, and so therefore, so the question is, because the informal industry, informal livelihoods is growing more than the formal, so perhaps there should be a way that the teaching, what do you call it, retools the informality, kind of brings the formal into the informality as well, because I think there's a very traditionally teaching, follows the pattern, and it's all about getting to the end of education and being employed. Whereas now, if everything is smaller, there's a lot of self-employment, etc. So there's the argument for how do we then teach to support how society is evolving. And so that's one of the aspects that we were looking at for this. So it's still very much a work in progress. And hopefully with when we finally write it out properly, you will see how all these are connected. So in terms of possible solutions to this teaching gap, the teaching crisis, we see that, of course, the solutions are, you know, the policies in Kenya are not just raised by the nation state. There is the global aspect as well as the state policies. And then we have community level interventions, and we, you know, right down to the home. So we'll look at how all these sections impact how decisions would be made to encourage teaching of technology and e-learning in Kenya. So at the global international level, so that's when we have the SDGs, the 17 goals, of which, you know, there's education, quite an important one. Earlier on, there was the talk of sustainability, but we know within it, we also have, you know, poverty, hunger, and, all these other aspects that together, come together to provide a good quality of life. So the SDGs could provide a basis. Also, at that level, transdisciplinary efforts. So not just looking at education and educators, but, industry, social scientists, psychologists, all these groups of knowledge, groups of thinking, so that we're not operating in a vacuum, but we're coming late into the game in Africa, in Kenya, that we should actually do it properly. We should do it better. We should not make the mistakes that have been made by other people. I think we can, we can adopt, the best teachings, the best learnings. And, I talk of international solidarity on sustainability, co-designing, and sharing the findings of how best to do this. So those are the goals. It's a kind of graphic that you would see a lot. If you Google it, the 17 SDGs, you can familiarize yourself if you're not already familiar with them. And at state level, possible solutions, of course, is having the rhetoric match the action. So inclusive policies that actually are actionalized for marginalized groups, especially those who live in rural areas who don't have, the infrastructure or access to resources, etc. I'm also a big proponent of, and this I think also adds, adds to the previous talk on sustainability, which is finding also what's good about what we already do, and how to enhance some of that to offset all these other modern adoptions that we're getting. Agenda balance at state level would be useful, because that's always a challenge, especially in developing countries. And to better rethink the informal structures that are coming up. And then at some, at a different level, but still state, is how can these solutions be ICT led? And I think I've mentioned most of these. So getting the best practices. There was an argument I came across about innovating backwards, which means, really looking backward, stepping back to consider the environment, and, a blend of IT and traditional, even indigenous ideas. And, possible solutions also, we're talking about teaching, and I was, we were looking at it from, like I said from the beginning, almost like a value chain. And I think that right down to the household level, some aspects can be resolved at that level. So especially the grassroots-led solutions to accessing information, maybe co-sharing, maybe community-led or community-sponsored, IT learning, etc. And just exchanges from other countries. So those are our thoughts so far. I've come to the end of the presentation. If you have any questions.
I'm pleased to introduce Prince, who will actually introduce his paper. Thank you.
All right, so today we'll be discussing about the education and skill development in the BME community in Northern Ireland. It's basically just about the use of e-learning to help facilitate the BME community. So my name is Prince Obaokore, and the other person here is Israel. He's the coordinator for Diverse Youth NI, which we represent in collaboration with Ulster University. And this is not working, just a little more. So Diverse Youth is actually a social group. We help that youth from diverse ethnicity group across the minority ethnicity group. It gives the BME youth the opportunity to see and appreciate their environment around the world. So basically what we do in Diverse Youth is to bring education straight into the community. The BME community, it's called the Black Asian Minority Ethnicity Group. So that's what the BME is all about. And the reason why we are actually carrying out this research is for three main purposes. The first one is for social and economic mobility. Here we discuss about the undeniable aspects of education as a powerful catalyst for social and economic mobility by breaking out the barriers hindering the access of quality education and skill opportunities, which could actually empower the BME community to overcome their social and economic exclusion rather. And with that, we'll be able to pave way for brighter futures, the younger generations, and also offer increased opportunity for upward mobility, thereby increasing the employment prospects across the UK. The second thing we tend to achieve is closing the opportunity gap. In Northern Ireland, we have discovered that the BME community encounters significant disparities and inequalities when it comes to accessing education and employment opportunities. But however, what makes the difference here is placing the focus on education and skill development within that community. So we work closer to closing that gap and create more inclusive society. And the third thing here is about diversity and inclusion. I've noticed across the UK now, in most organizations, they have been trying to bring that as a culture into their system because they have realized the importance of diversity and inclusion within the organization. So education and skill development initiatives that targets the BME community in Northern Ireland could contribute to fostering diversity and inclusion. This simply means individuals from diverse backgrounds have access to education and skill development. This would actually promote a more inclusive society that values and celebrates diversity. So the benefit of this is it enriches the community by creating a more diverse and culturally vibrant environment, which also promotes social cohesion. So with e-learning offers that flexible and accessible approach pathway to education, where people who have access to devices could actually benefit from the education and skill development. So we'll just run through an overview of the BME community, what the BME community is in Northern Ireland. So according to NISRA, NISRA is the Northern Ireland Research Association, basically. So what they do, they provided a statistics and said the population of the BME in Northern Ireland for the BME community accounts for about 3.4%, which is 65,600 of the total population when they did their statistics, the census in 2021. So within that latest classification, the largest group of people were the mixed ethnicity, which were about 14,400, and the Black community was 11,000. Then you have the likes of India, which had the 9,900, and the other communities. And the major thing there was within the BME community, individuals had migrated to Northern Ireland for various reasons, such as seeking better opportunities, education, joining family members, or either escaping conflict or persecution or economic hardship in their country of origin. So the migrant pattern here in the BME community is diverse because it encompasses the refugees, the asylum seekers, as well as individuals who actually arrive for work and study purposes. From recent data from the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency, which is the NISRA, it reveals that there was an increase of 7% in the number of asylum seekers in Northern Ireland, which reached about 8,869 by the end of June 2021. And because English became the dominant language in Northern Ireland, the BME are individuals who speak a wide range of languages, and this may range in different levels of English proficiency. I could remember when you come to write your IELTS, they ask you, what's your level? It could be intermediate or basic or advanced, so or fluency. So that's how the level of English proficiency in the BME community actually is. And language barrier can pose the challenges in accessing education or employment or even the social integration within the community. So the next thing here is about the challenges. The BME community experiences loads of challenges. They experience loads of challenges. And today we have noticed that there's difficulty in accessing education and developing essential skills for the success in the modern day workplace. Because the world has actually moved into a different sphere. People are finding it difficult when you don't have the necessary skills to actually come into that workplace. And most of the skills that the BME community face, the first one is, most of the challenges rather that the BME community face is a language barrier. And the next one is cultural differences. And the other one is limited access to resources and support network. Now, to better understand these challenges, we actually did a comprehensive need assessment to be able to understand what are the challenges, common challenges that the BME community is actually facing. By conducting that, we saw that language barrier, cultural differences, limited access to resources and support network are the key major challenges they are facing. And also we discovered that this is because of lack of digital literacy in the organization. And looking at the refugees and the asylum who are also part of the BME community often face unique obstacles in accessing education or employment or even skill development opportunities. And considering the digital divide existing in Northern Ireland, we noticed that there is about 32% of the work age population that lack digital skills, surpassing the nationwide average. And this has created a disparity in accessing information, which is education, and also employment prospect and essential service within the BME community, which has resulted into inequality. So for language barrier, we discussed earlier that BME community have this limited English proficiency, which poses difficulty for some of them to actually hamper their educational and skill development opportunities. And for cultural differences here is the variation in the cultural practices and exemption can impact their access to education and skill development. For limited resources, the BME community are often encounter restricted availability of educational resources or mentorship programs or support system, hindering their progress. So to address this problem, Diverse Youth, we have prioritized digital literacy here to bridge the existing gap of the digital divide and also the lack of basic digital skills within the BME community. So at Diverse Youth, we're taking the education directly to the community through digital means. However, we have recognized that there's a pressing need of ICT training or ICT skills, especially among the youth. So in collaboration with Belfast City of Sanctuary, we decided to empower the BME community with essential ITC skills. So, but along the line, we discovered that the BME community, sorry, I passed it. So along the line, we discovered that the BME community is actually struggling to thrive in the digital world. And by understanding what the digital skill entails in educational achievement and employment prospect, we discovered that there are some significant issues that needs to be addressed within this, within the area of digital literacy for the BME community. The first one is accessibility. So accessibility remains a concern because we have unequal access to quality educational opportunities, such as the e-learning resource or the online courses, as well as language barriers, which hinders the participation in digital learning and development of digital skills within the BME community. Lots of them lack that access to such facility or such provision. The next one is affordability. This is one of the major issues within the ICT, within the digital literacy in BME community to get that skill, because many of the individuals within the BME community lack personal devices like the laptops, the phone, or the iPads, or any digital equipment required for online engagement and digital learning. This is because of most of the individuals are coming from an economic disadvantage backgrounds in their country. Maybe they flee because of conflict or persecution or any hardship within the country. The next one is knowledge and usage of ICT. There's been a disparity within the BME community in the aspect of ICT knowledge and usage within the community. Many individuals have limited proficiency in using digital tools or navigating online platform. And this issue becomes more complex when considering the relevance of ICT skill for social or economic and cultural integration in the society, especially for the migrants or the settled individuals. But for potential resolutions, we looked at 3 core policies that could actually resolve these issues or challenges. The first one here is social integration policy. So social integration policy here, what we are looking at is aiming to promote equal opportunities, inclusion and diversity within the society. So this strives to ensure that individuals from the BME community have access to education, training, and resources needed to develop ICT skills. So it's important that these social integration policies promote the recognition of ICT skills in facilitating communication, networking, and community engagement. So this is going to involve support to community organizations such as Diverse Youth NI and Belfast City of Sanctuary, which offers ICT training mentorship and support services for the BME community. The second one here is employment and economic policies. So these policies should focus on promoting diversity and inclusion in workforces. So the essence of this is because the economic policy, which we know in the UK plays a very important role in facilitating who and who comes into the organization. Now, that's the reason why there have been the incorporation of diversity and inclusion practices in most organizations. So this economic policy is going to play a vital role in facilitating affordability and accessibility to ICT resources, which we mentioned are the key issues for digital literacy in the BME community. So these policies will include subsidies or financial assistance to individuals from these economic disadvantaged backgrounds, enabling them to acquire these digital devices or give them access to the internet, and also give them the participation entrance into the ICT training programs or initiatives across ICT related industries. And with that, people could have the opportunity, this policy should encourage industries to create that platform for people to engage in job placement programs in order to get the hands-on skills after the theoretical skills they get. The other one we look at here is the one of digital inclusion policy. So here we're discussing about what the government and organization must develop and implement this policy to prioritize digital inclusion and address the barrier faced by the BME community. Considering the amount of the BME community contributes about 32% of the total population. So there should be a policy that prioritizes the digital inclusion to enable these BME people have improved internet connectivity or provide them access to devices, affordable devices or software, and also ensure that culturally relevant digital contents are also there to also make them engaged. So in tackling this issue, Diverse Youth NI and the Belfast City of Sanctuary are exploring the issue at both social and technical level. So we tackle this issue by partnering with bodies such as Belfast City of Sanctuary to create impactful initiatives to address the pressing issue of education and skill development in the BME community. So through research or in pursuing for finding out effective solutions, we partnered with Ulster University because we discovered that they're the only sole civic university in all of Ireland. And this collaboration has enabled us to develop and implement tailored education and skill programs that cater to the needs of our community, the BME community. Notably, we have introduced ICT trainings and also created engaging e-learning platforms, and also provide unlimited access to these valuable resources and fostering support networks. So the first thing we did by leveraging this powerful tool of e-learning is by creating online language courses. So through this interactive language learning platform, we offer support in native language and facilitate language acquisition and promote cultural integration here. The second thing was virtual tutoring and mentoring programs. So the online platform connects BME learners with tutors and mentors from their own community. In this sense, it gives them a feel of inclusion. It gives them the feel of community vibe. So this is a support tool that provides academic guidance, encouragement, and inspiring role models. The other one is a digital skill training. So we recognize the importance of digital literacy in today's job market. These days now, if you're not evolving with the digital world, you cannot be able to get employment in certain roles. Just like lots of accountants then that do the paperwork now uses Excel. So without the skill of Excel, you may tend to be left out of your job. So that's what we are recognizing. So we've recognized the importance of digital literacy in the job market. So our e-learning program focuses on equipping the BME individuals with essential digital skills, and also empowering them to enhance their employability in the digital era. The other one is the virtual cultural exchange program. Here, what we are looking at is we foster on the intercultural understanding and promote unity. We have developed online platform that facilitates cultural exchange and collaboration. So this provides them with the opportunity to virtually interact, allow participants to embrace diversity and celebrate different cultures. So the next thing we look at here is the tested programs. So what we've done in Diverse Youth is we've tried to test these initiatives. We've tried to see how this initiative can be able to address the education and skill development needs of the BME community. So through range of ICT training pilot projects, we've been able to empower individuals and also bridge the digital gap a bit. So the first thing we did was to start up with a digital literacy program. So our comprehensive program focuses on providing foundational ICT skills to individuals within the BME community. So we cover topics like the computer basics, the internet navigation, email usage, and online safety. So by enhancing this digital literacy, the BME individuals, the participants, gain the confidence and knowledge to navigate through the digital landscape with ease. The second one is the e-learning and online education. So we have recognized the significance of e-learning in today's educational landscape. So partnering with that Ulster University, we partnered with them to offer accessible online courses and resources. So through this initiative, the BME individuals can access education remotely and also empower them to develop new skills and also further education and also enhance their career prospect. Next one we looked at was the ICT career development as a tested solution. So our pilot project here is dedicated to equipping the participant, the BME individual participant, with the necessary ICT skills and knowledge to thrive in the digital industry. So we delved into critical areas like programming, web development, data analysis, or digital marketing, and even robotics for the youth. So through hands-on training and mentorship, these BME individuals acquired practical skills, positioning them for the success of the evolving ICT sector. The fourth one was digital entrepreneurship. So we were passionate about creating entrepreneurs within the BME community, people who could use the skills to actually create business mediums for themselves. So our initiative here was to give them insight into business development, teach them about digital marketing strategy, talk about people's management, and also e-commerce platforms. So through this guidance and support, we've been able to empower the BME individuals to launch and grow their own digital ventures like videography and lots of them, fostering a culture of innovation and economic empowerment. So for the tested pilot solution programs, the first one we did was, it ran through October 2022 right onto December 2022. The essence of this one was just for women empowerment and capacity building. So 42 women registered for this, and we had 100% attendance, and we taught them introduction to ICT. None of the participants had any skills whatsoever, but at the end of the day, the participant expressed an understanding of basic computer terminologies and basic operations. And they also recommended that they further train to upskill themselves. So we decided now to do a second pilot project program, again, which took place from May this year right on to June, and it's still ongoing. 70 people registered, both male and female, and they come from diverse BME communities. Our target audience basically were the asylum seekers and the refugees and the BME migrants. So we provided, in collaboration with Ulster University, we provided 60 spaces, and we had a total high number of people attendant, but lots of them complained that the reason why they couldn't attend was language barrier, which is one of our challenges. And we're trying to bridge that through e-learning by providing tutorship, free tutorship, or even in-person training. And the other ones were child minding, lots of other ones complained about transportation costs and access to ICT equipment, which has become paramount when we discussed about the issues that we face in delivering digital literacy was accessibility. So this access is how they could access it, the affordability of these devices, which is a key issue for the BME community. But at the end of the day, the people who participated for this, it was a 10 weeks duration program, actually expressed an understanding of computer terminologies and also higher operations within the computer world, within the digital space. And they also wanted to also upskill again, which will we also run when we get support or sponsorship from other organizations. So these are pictures of the training pilot programs we have been able to run here with Ulster University. I'll just run through them. So these are the programs here. We have the women capacity on my left. We have the women capacity building there, and the web designing and coding ongoing on this other aspect, videography as well. So these are children also. We're not just focusing on just set of individuals within the BME, we're also focusing on the younger ones as well, where we teach them how to do robotics and use learn other computer skills. So this is also pilot projects we did. So, but basically the essence of the whole thing is we're looking at SDG. We know that education and skill development, which includes the use of e-learning, are essential today in the SDG goals. And since the SDG is a global commitment, we are looking at the goal to eradicate poverty, promote quality education, and also foster gender equality and a whole lot more within the BME community. And by harnessing the power of e-learning within the realm of education and skill development, we have the opportunity to contribute to these goals and also propel inclusive and equitable access to education. So in the context of Northern Ireland BME community, so investing in education and skill development becomes more critical because it fosters inclusion, diversity, and social cohesion, so which aligns directly with the sustainable development goals. So by embracing e-learning, individuals from the BME community can navigate the digital landscape and also acquire the necessary skills to thrive in the online realm. So we have been able to recognize that ICT training not only empowers individuals, but also allow the BME communities, the asylum seekers, which are also part of the BME communities, to stay connected with their family and communities in their own country of origin, by also supporting their mental health and their overall well-being. So in conclusion, by embracing education and skill development, e-learning can contribute to more inclusive society and bridge the digital gap, and also create opportunities for the BME community in Northern Ireland. So we're looking forward to partnership with organizations who actually believe in education and skill development at large. So thank you. I don't know if anybody has any questions. So.
It's personalized learning experience. The one that has personalized learning.
We're starting.
No, Margaret is going to display them on now. You can just say it.
Okay, personalized learning experience.
So we're introducing your presentation, part of which is by chat.
Yeah.
So in which case we'll pass across to you to very quickly take us through it again.
Yeah, personalized learning experience. If you go down, scroll down, you'll find it.
We've got the introduction with the overall of what's happening.
Personalized learning experience. When you go down,
the argument of what it's about.
Yeah, go down,
and
down there to the benefits,
So we're going through defining it.
Yeah, to the benefits.
So we're going through defining the chat.
Yeah, ChatGPT.
Defining again.
Yes. So
defining
to the benefits,
again.
Benefits.
Yeah. Okay, so you go down.
So was this
Please.
question generated by chat?
No, it wasn't.
Is
Go
this
down. No, that's not ChatGPT.
was
Go
this
down, please.
some
Is it-
Go down,
suggestions?
please. Go down, please. Down,
Other
please.
tasks?
Down, down, down,
Virtual tutors?
down, please.
We're talking about assessments.
Mhm.
Was this?
Yeah. The
this
next
one?
slide. Yeah,
That
this
one.
one.
Yeah.
And the
okay.
one after that.
So that talk about the student needs is generated by it.
So
Yeah.
the references
Yes.
there.
This one.
Yes.
This one too. And this one.
Okay.
And then this one.
So
Okay.
this is
reference,
generated. This is
Yeah.
generated.
No.
No, this one
report-
is not ChatGPT. The rest are not generated by ChatGPT.
Okay, so these aren't other. So when we're coming on to the plagiarism, this is your work again.
Yes, these are from the reviews and the
And then we've got here, was this you or
which
chat?
one? Strategies. No, chat is finished.
It's a
Okay,
chat
the only-
GPT. It's
Yeah,
only
the only
those,
the only
those
place you can find ChatGPT again is in the references. You have
Yeah.
some
Okay.
ChatGPT references.
So we have our conclusion, the snapshot of Q&A
These are
system.
from the reviews and other articles.
So these
Okay.
again is your work.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're now
So-
coming in, and this is
How
actually from
many of
chat.
the references were provided by a chat GPT?
No.
Let me
Thank
see.
you.
I think half of it.
Ah,
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Good afternoon, distinguished scholar. My name is Hagbulu Ajibabatunde, and I will be presenting a review of augmented reality in biomedical engineering education. To define augmented reality, you can define it as a combination of a real scene that is viewed by a user and a virtual scene that is computer generated. So to explain it in a simpler time, it's the combination of two different scenes, which is the physical one that the person is seeing, the viewer is seeing, and the one that is generated by a computer. And the goal of augmented reality is to create a multimodal learning environment that encourages students to participate actively in the learning process, and also to provide them with a more efficient means of visualizing and interacting with abstract concepts using multiple senses. Because one thing about augmented reality is it's able to use all the senses, the auditory, the sight. So it can it encompasses all this sensory thing to give you the experience that we need. And then one of the benefits of augmented reality is that it blends both virtual and the real environment together. Unlike VR, that is virtual reality, that only completely immerses the user in a simulated reality. Augmented, on the other hand, blends both the physical and the virtual world together. So talking about the history of augmented reality. So augmented reality has improved over the years. Aside from the 1968, when the first head-mounted display was introduced. So the figure here shows the progress, the journey of augmented reality over the years. And in 2017, Google and Apple launched their AR-based tools for developers to assist them to create mobile applications. So Google was able to create AR Core for 100 users, and then Apple was developers were able to create the augmented reality kit. And ever since then, the usage of augmented reality has actually grown, thereby making consumers to visualize products and then experiences. So with this product, people are able to actually have an experience of their product without even without buying it. For instance, if you look at the likes of IKEA, you can now get a table and fit it into your room without you actually buying the physical table. So these are the things that augmented reality can do. These are the improvements that they have done. The likes of the Snapchat filter that we have out there that people use on social media. It's the possibility of augmented reality is actually endless, and the utilization of augmented reality has been witnessing a substantial surge in recent times. So applications keeps coming up, development keeps coming up every day. And since augmented reality combines both real and augmented and the virtual world together, so in order to combine these two worlds, so there is need to have a precise model so that we can have an accurate augmented experience. And also the location and the optical property of the viewer and the display must be taken into consideration. Likewise, the calibration of all the devices that is used for this system. And lastly, the local coordinate of the systems, that is, since it uses a device to actually augment what you are seeing. So the device will act as the local coordinates, while the object you are viewing will be the global coordinates. This way, it gives you the precise location and the precise experience of what you are looking at with respect to you as a person, as the owner, as the holder of the object and the device that you're using to actually view the object. So augmented reality works based on two different technologies. For the time being, as I said earlier, there is improvement over every time, but currently it's based on two display technologies, which is the monitor-based and the head-mounted display. The monitor-based technology, involves the use of the laptops, the cell phones, the tablets, projectors, and then the advantage of this monitor display is that it is consumer-level equipment and it is readily available. And because of the availability of this monitor-based devices, a lot of research is actually aimed on this type of display. The other version is the head-mounted display. An example of it is the video see-through display, and then the optical see-through head-mounted display. So I'll be explaining this in the next slide. So for the optical see-through head-mounted display, as shown in the figure here, so it works by placing optical combiner in front of the user eyes. Let me turn on this lesser point. Okay, so this is an actual example of the optical see-through head-mounted display, and it works by placing the optical combiner in front of the user eyes. This is optical combiner, and then this optical combiner is partially transmittive, such that the user can look directly through it and see the real world. That is, if you're looking at this one here, it is partially transmittive. So when someone wears this, you are able to see objects in front of you. And then it is also partially reflective, so that the user is able to see the virtual images that is bounced off from this combiner. So that's basically how it works. And this device is similar to what we have on the military aircraft. And the advantage of this type of optical see-through head-mounted display is that you can see through it even when the power is turned off. The next one is the video see-through head-mounted display. Unlike the first one that you can see whenever it is powered off, this one you can't, because it works by combining a closed view head-mounted display with two or more video cameras. So in this one, it has two video cameras. And then what the video camera does is they provide the user view of the real world. So this camera see the environment, they scan the environment, and then they overlay it with images that are being generated from this scene generator. So there's a scene generator here that generates an image, and then whatever the camera here is seeing, it overlays it on it, and then the result is sent to the monitor. So there's a monitor behind this camera. So the result is sent to that monitor in front of the user's eyes to see. The benefit of this is that it is flexible and it produces more compelling environment for the user. A popular example of this is the Google, no, sorry, not the Google, the Apple Provision that is recently launched. So that's an example of the video see-through head-mounted display. So I'll talk briefly about biomedical engineering program. Biomedical engineering program is an interdisciplinary field of study that is aimed at solving specific healthcare problem. And it does this by combining concepts, knowledge, and approach from almost all the different branches of engineering. So this program provides numerous opportunities for interaction between the engineers and the healthcare professions. So applying the augmented reality features here, it can help to enhance the program, and then the education. It's going to make it more easier for students to easily understand what is being taught, especially considering the fact that there are some practical, some research that you have to carry out with these that are very expensive, and then the fact that there are some equipment that you may not be really that are not readily available for the student to use as and when they need it. So incorporating augmented reality into this program really help the student to learn more. So I'll be talking more now about the current augmented reality trends in biomedical engineering education, because AR has been used in various ways in biomedical engineering education currently. So currently, the visualization and manipulation of data is one of the top trend of the use of the AR in biomedical engineering. And this visualization involved the use of 3D models of organs, of things around you. And the advantage is that it allows students to actually see how the different structures that they're looking at fits together, and then it's excellent to understand. So for instance, if you're looking at the art structure, so you can visualize it without actually carrying out the experiment or the check on a real art. So you can visualize it in an augmented reality way. And also, I'll talk more about this type because there are a lot of devices now that are using this visualization. Regarding the surgical training, so AR has been employed to simulate surgical procedures and has allowed students to practice and refine their skills. And the good thing about this thing is that you can carry out all these things in a safe and controlled environment. So an example of the technology devices that is being used right now, or the apps, so to say, is the Anatomy X and then the Sim Surgery. So these are the types of the applications that are currently being used to assist learning in this field. And the good thing is that they help to reduce, they lead to better outcome. And, they in terms of the way you're passing out the learning to students. So it helps to enhance learning. So these are some of the current devices. So the first one here is the Google Augmented Reality Microscope. And it's a system that has bright field microscope, and it has attached to a computer that is already programmed with machine learning. And then what it does is it's able to diagnose cancer in real time. And it does this using microscopic image. So with this, it has helped pathologists to be able to scan large images, rapidly. So you don't have to wait any longer. Like you can easily scan many slides and then give you an accurate result. Another one is this X Micro VR. So this combines neural image techniques. Let me skip this. Another one. This is another one. The Conquer VR. Another one is this Microsoft HoloLens. So it's also an head-mounted display, and they use it to augment to see things in 3D while you are working on structures, and it allows you to interact with the object you are looking at. So implementing augmented reality in biomedical engineering education requires careful planning and consideration. And some of the strategies that we can use to implement this includes: one, to start small. When you start small by introducing these augmented reality apps or simulation into specific lessons or modules for the students. And when you do this, it allows students to become familiar with the technology that they are being introduced to, and it helps them to know the potential use of this technology. Also, another strategy is to collaborate with industry partners and experts who are already in this AR development, so that when you collaborate with them, they help to create custom application that is suitable for your use based on the class you're taking, the kind of module that you have. So you create an augmented reality technology that is basically for you. And then this can, the advantage of this type is that it ensures that the technology that is being used can be, that is being introduced can be used effectively and efficiently, because it is done to suit your need. And the benefits of augmented reality in biomedical engineering. So by using augmented reality, it has helped to increase student engagement and motivation, because using augmented reality, it makes learning more interactive, because now students can perceive what they are learning. They can see it right in front of them. So they're able to immerse themselves in that environment, and then the students are more likely to stay engaged, and then they retain the information more. And it's also, it has helped to improve understanding and retention of the concept that have been taught in class, because by visualizing and manipulating 3D objects, it's actually, because while they're doing it, it engages all their senses. So, and this can lead to a better outcome and improved their experience and learning. So we cannot talk about augmented reality without talking about the risk and the challenges that are involved in this. So one of the challenges includes the physical hazard, the cybersecurity risk, the privacy concerns, the cognitive, ethical issues, misinformation, and addiction. So I'll be taking this briefly. So for the physical hazard, because augmented reality requires user interaction with the virtual objects as well as the environment. So most of the times this can lead to accident, especially when the user, the student is really engrossed in the experience. So when they are engrossed in their experience and they are not aware of what is happening around them anymore, it can lead to accidents such as the collision, or they can even run into a wall, or walk into an hazardous environment. So for the cybersecurity risk, because the augmented reality, actually the applications worked based on, they rely more on internet. And so because of this, there is a potential cybersecurity threat, because these applications, they collect data and they store the data. So there's possibility of a data breach, unauthorized access to your information, your personal information. And therefore the privacy concern, because this AR technology, they collect data and then they store it. So there is a risk of privacy invasion. And then some of this data, you never can tell who ends up getting your personal information, and then it can be surveyed. It leaves room for surveillance, and then the data can be shared without consent. So you don't have control of some of this data that is being collected by this application. And also for the cognitive distraction, yes, because AR, it overlays the virtual object on the physical one, on what you're looking at. So things like this demands attention. So when you're giving your attention to it, it diverts you away from what you are doing. So they're carrying out a task that require you to like a critical task, for instance, like driving, or like you're operating machine, you're working in the lab. So when you have this kind of distraction, it can lead to accident and things like that. So that's another risk. And also the ethical issues. So this is about the invasion of privacy, the psychological manipulation, because you don't really have control of the kind of data that is being put out there, or how it is being processed. And one thing about these ethical issues is like it leaves room to biases, because the algorithm that is being used to decide, to make decisions, you don't have any control over them. So there's room for biasness in this technology as well. And then for the misinformation, yes. So because there's potential to create fake content, because what you're looking at is semi-real, in the sense that you're looking at a virtual object on a physical one. So it can manipulate your perception about the thing you are looking at. And then the addiction and dependency, yes, when you get used to this, when students get used to this, then they become addicted to it, and then they might become over-dependent on this technology. So those are the risks and challenges to be aware of in the use of augmented reality. And to mitigate this risk, because we cannot just talk about the risks, we need to talk about how to mitigate against this risk. So this is essential for augmented reality developer and user, and then most importantly, policymakers, to address issues that has been listed, so that when they create policies to guide it, I think by implementing this appropriate safeguard measure and guidelines, we can actually promote responsible and beneficial use of this augmented reality technology. And then for the limitation, the major limitation of this technology is finance, because most of the educational institutions may be prevented from using this technology because of the price. The Apple provision is around £3,000. That's just for one device. Now, if you want to multiply this by the number of students in a class, you can see how much it's going to be, and that's just for one device. So the finance limitation is one of the limitations. The financial aspect is one of the limitations, and then the limited knowledge about the operations. Currently, there's limited knowledge on how to use, and then how this thing has been the working principle of this technology. So this is another limitation. And then as time goes on, students might disregard the traditional reading, and then they rely more, because I said it earlier, that when there's over dependency, it might lead to over dependency on that technology. And then health-wise, the frequent use and then the prolonged use of this device may lead to medical consequences, such as migraine and then vision problems, because you're actually looking at it at a close range. So future expectation. Advancements in the field of augmented reality have actually sparked discussion about the potential introduction of augmented reality interface book. So this interface is like textbook, but augmented. So what you have before you, it can be like a book. So you open it up but as you are flipping it, it will bring out objects of what you are looking for. For instance, let's say you are studying art structures. So the augmented textbook will actually bring out the augmented image, virtual image of that art image, and then you can study it. So it's a future expectation, and research is actually still going on this textbook, augmented reality textbook. And then remote learning and telemedicine, yes. Because with this, considering the COVID-19 pandemic and everything that happened around that, it has actually enhanced the way we teach, the way knowledge is being passed across. And so augmented reality could really be of great benefit to students and even the lecturers, the teachers as well. Because with remote learning, you don't need to be in a place physically anymore. You can be in the comfort of your room, and then you get appropriate things to learn as well. Right there, you can carry out practicals, and it saves you the time and then the money in getting some equipment. So with augmented reality, those are the things you can do. And then with telemedicine, it helps with the fact that you can be, there is a current what I say technology, not really technology. It works such that you can be with the 5G and then the advancement in our network service provider, you can actually be on the other side of the world, and then you carry out surgery, carry out things with this, that is right there from where you are. So in an augmented way, you're not there physically, but you can do things in an augmented way. So these are one of the future expectations. And to conclude this, augmented reality has emerged as a powerful tool in biomedical engineering, in education generally, and it is also revolutionizing the way students and interact with things. Although here, it still seems to be misconstrued as too high tech for people to understand. But I believe the biggest shift in augmented reality will have to be how it is delivered to change that perception. And the truth is, everybody's using AR. Like AR is already in use by everyday consumer, but just that most people are not aware of this, because virtually everything we're doing, most things we're doing now, it has a bit of AR in it. The way we buy things online, the experiences has changed, social media way has changed things. And as educators continue to harness this power of augmented reality, I guess we can look forward to a future where learning becomes even more engaging and meaningful and then impactful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Odi, again. So welcome everyone to the second part of the afternoon session for Inspire 2023. I think we have two presentations here. The first by Neil Gordon from Hull, and the second by Kirsten Siakas from Finland. I think to start with, I'll hand over the floor to Neil. And Neil's title is The Use and Abuse of Foundational AI in Software Engineering Education and Practice. The floor is yours now, Neil, please.
Thanks, James, and hello, everyone. So apologies, I missed the earlier part of the event. I had another exam board I was at today. I was external elsewhere, though. So this talk is looking at software engineering practice. I thought it's an interesting thing relevant to the Inspire conference, and about the potential for foundational AI systems like ChatGPT, like Bard, for software engineering, for both education and for practice as well. And again, given the concerns in the media last year or two about this topic, and so the question about the use and abuse of it. And this is work primarily with John Dixon and Zivan Mian, who are colleagues here in computer science. Although equally, it leads on from things I've done with Mike Brayshaw before. It's nice that Mike's here, and he can add to the discussion at the end, no doubt. So obviously, the sort of information AI systems have become very well known in general use. They're quite effective for software engineering, for programming, to ChatGPT, Bard, more general systems. For software engineering focused ones, programming ones like Copilot, which can help programmers live programming in suggesting code to complete and using repositories of existing code to complete new projects. So this talk, look at some ways these systems could undermine traditional programming education and equally how we might provide solutions. I think one of the things that education and society are looking at the moment is how far do these new AI systems give us a new step change in challenges. Sometimes talks about the Industrial Revolution 4 and move to the computing age. Again, in the last year or so, there's been a lot of concerns about AI now and how these systems are going to affect jobs, have potential implications to people. And so for engineers in particular, these tools offer new opportunities and new problems. Again, education and training can help our students, and become graduates, and become our programmers in understanding and making most of these opportunities and avoiding the pitfalls. Again, in this talk, I've got a few images. This image is one I got, again, from a financial AI system. It's from Deep AI. So I gave it some words to say, software engineering and generative AI, and it suggests that nice image. This is a cyberpunk version. So that's a brand new image generated for the talk. So I have no graphical ability, no drawing ability. And whilst I think it looks interesting, I don't really have the skills to determine if that's good, bad, or if it's based on stolen content. And that's the challenge we face in all these aspects of these systems. Now, one of the questions is how far these systems are going to replace humans in applications. And again, in the media, in the last 12 months, many countries and many commentators have been concerned about potential for mass unemployment, mass change in the world of work because of these systems. And we can see that these systems are very good at predicting what comes next. They can predict plausible words and phrases. Again, using the huge volume of data they've collected, they can mimic intelligence. And that's one of these philosophical questions around AI. It's not necessarily knowledge or understanding. In a sense, it's predictive text generation with, say, human training, you can configure randomness. As humans, we acquire and have other knowledge, we can understand and can develop, and hopefully we're driven by our underlying rationale and understanding. And again, when you look at AI systems and applications, again, some of the control systems, autonomous vehicles, these accidents happening because the vehicle doesn't have any implicit rationale. It can learn certain things, it has vision recognition, it can mimic intelligence, but it's not intelligent. And that's where we again have to understand the limitations and possibilities. So one of the questions we looked at was, is this really a disaster we're facing? And again, you see the media, the calls to license and legislate AI. And I think there's a good rationale for much of that, but it is predicted as this potential cataclysm. Again, there's been the last 2 or 3 months, people predicting a huge singularity point where AI is now getting close to being the cause of human extinction, potentially. On a smaller level, institutions, universities have been responding to the rise of AI by looking at how can we ban it, can we control it? Again, a lot of debate around assessment at universities is should we alter assessments so that they can't use AI systems? Do we have new and feminist policies where we include AI and generative AI systems as being precluded? And that goes back to a long-standing educational challenge. Do we stop people using new skills, new technologies? There's a famous one when writing was established and people said, well, writing will be the end of human thinking and memory. And should we ban writing? They didn't ban writing, and we've built on that over thousands of years. But equally things like calculators, computers, internet have all faced challenges as they're introduced. Schools banning them so that students have learned arithmetic, universities banning computers for set assessments. Some of that's because of a challenge it creates in how we assess and what we teach, sometimes because of practicalities. That way you can limit technology and focus on knowledge and understanding, but is that really useful if we have these things available and if people go out into their future lives, their careers, the aspects of their living, then it's not going to be a case of not using this technology. So should we look at how we can actually use it to augment our higher order skills and focus on them? So should we prevent or adopt? So we can control environments. Again, my institution, we're talking now about returning to some on-campus invigilated exams on computers, but where we monitor them so students can't collaborate, and in particular, they can't use AI systems and other systems to potentially cheat. The more positive approach would be to look at how we can adopt technology in programming, software engineering. One way we're looking at the moment is how we do things like pair programming, where one of the pair is a computer. So you use ChatGPT, use Copilot to generate code, and then the student, in solving a problem, comments on and addresses the challenges of that code. Let us raise issues of copyright. Again, for practitioners, if using things like Copilot or ChatGPT to help you write a solution, and you get some code out of that, if you put that code into your solution, where's that code come from? ChatGPT hasn't generated it uniquely. Again, I think ChatGPT, its code base, a lot of it came from Reddit. Copilot uses a lot of the code repositories to generate its answers. So the code it's suggesting isn't novel code in that sense. So who actually owns it? We're looking then at how can we look at maybe a more revolution then? So if AI is changing things, how do we adopt that? If it's prevalent in our world around us, in our home lives, you've got Echo Dots in your house. If you use Siri to solve problems, if you've got access to AI in your home life, in your career work, should we stop it in education and in software engineering? So that is, how can we look at foundational AI systems to perhaps help students reduce that need to memorize things, make it easier to find facts and knowledge, and look at how we can use that to solve higher level problems, which hopefully will be more closer to what they'll be doing when they graduate and go on to apply their knowledge, their skills in the world around them. So various problems we face with AI still, that's something that is an ongoing challenge for us as software engineers, as educators, as computer scientists. One of the queries is, are the answers right or wrong? Say AI can easily generate answers that are beyond the knowledge of teachers or students. The answer could be right or it could be wrong. The wrong answers will often be very plausible, but it's had to be correct judgment. How would you know? So that means you've got to think about how do we design proper questions which will get students to think about how they get the answers and how we determine the answer is correct. So you've got to postulate a problem where the student's got to not just get some sort of answer, but identify that answer is actually accurate. So we're going to look at tools that could spot inaccurate answers. Also be aware though, we don't want to create a new digital divide with things like access to AI. So one of the challenges again at the moment, things like ChatGPT, so version 3 you can use for free to evaluate. If you want access to the more functional, better version, ChatGPT 4, you've got to go through a paywall. As some other developing AI systems, whilst companies are putting some of them into tool sets, making them available APIs for free for now, many of the better ones are going to be behind paywalls. And that means that we face a new digital divide where people that can afford access to AI will pay for it. People who can't could get left behind. So think about in our assessments at universities, at schools, colleges, we don't build in digital divide intrinsically because of this access to AI. So part of it is going to look at how we think about assessments. Do we mandate use of AI to augment information gathering? In which case we can say that people should use it, specify the sorts of tools to use, and importantly, how to report on those tools. Again, current AI systems, they're very good at producing generic and generally accurate data based on the huge amounts of information we've got. Some caveats to that. Obviously, these systems are as capable, seemingly, of high order skills. So application, evaluation, analysis, and novel creation, truly novel, is something which is still beyond the scope of in practice. There's a question about if the answers are accurate or not. So to think about the challenges these systems have in terms of the limitations they exhibit, whether or not the answers are correct, and how we can make use of them in appropriate ways. So one of the approaches there when teaching programming and teaching other topics for addressing this challenge of AI, is about training students to use AI as a critical friend in the early stages of fact finding. In that sense, we could identify the use of AI, that support, and regulate it, and explain to students the difference between use and misuse. So there's an ethical issue to that. There's also a practical one. They can learn about how to cite, reference AI appropriately. Several of the international referencing standards now introducing ways to cite AI. So I think APA has now got a citation format for generative AI answers. I think in Harvard, now university now is recommending students use the Harvard sort of private communications format to cite AI. I was recently looking at AI actually earlier today for ChatGPT for this talk. Can see now that in the chats in ChatGPT, you can generate a unique link to a chat. So you can cite your chat on ChatGPT and other people can access it. So we can see how to appropriately use ChatGPT and BARD and other foundational AI systems. Let students understand how the AI can assist in developing understandings of domain areas and understand the limitations. And so spend more time in that process on the way that students can develop, understand and learn. So how they look at the research application knowledge and how they reflect upon and talk about what they've used the AI tool for, what it's generated, and how that can give them some answers. So in practice for software engineering developers in general, and in general life now, we face the same sort of challenges in general use of AI as in education. Let's say for software engineers, developers, gives us new opportunities and threats. Things like Copilot, IntelliCode are ways to use generative AI to answer programming problems. They can offer code completions, help solve problems. So these systems are quite good at programming, perhaps not unexpectedly. They've been designed to be able to learn from, in that caveat of what we mean by learn there, but to learn from large volumes of text. They're learning from languages with grammars. And so the most formal grammar-based languages are programming languages. So probably the best feature is how they can program, albeit with a caveat that they may get things wrong, may misunderstand things. And we need to be looking at how we test our answers and how we fairly use those answers. So I thought it might be interesting to see a few examples of that. How many of you have played with ChatGPT before or used Copilot or IntelliCode? So we're looking at it in terms of our courses here at Hull. How far can students get answers and what can they do? Now, there's been ways to easily find code solutions before. We know students have looked at code repositories to answer our problems. We know that they've paid other people to write code sometimes. We try and track that, catch it, if we need to take them through discipline. The challenge of things like foundational AI systems, so following examples from ChatGPT, but other systems have got similar features, is that not only are they able to give you some sort of answer, the same way that a Google search might, but things like Mathematica can give you answers on the Wolfram Alpha site, but actually explains it and explains it quite well. So, for example, this one, what Python code would work out the lowest common denominator divisor of two integers. So the answer for ChatGPT, first of all, it clarifies what I'd meant. So it tells you what the LCD is. This is in Python, how you might do that using the greatest common denominator function for the maths module. And then it gives an example of using it. Import math, define two integers, calculate the LCD, print the result. and it explains further beyond that, in this code, what the GCD function did. So all of that code space was generated by foundational AI. The narrative description before it and after it was from foundational AI. Want to do maybe a C# program? We teach C# in first year. What invert a matrix? So here's an example of a C# program inverts a matrix. Tells you to import system namespace, import system link namespace, defines a matrix inversion namespace, and then it gives you a program using the matrix method or matrix object, and uses the inverse method to invert the matrix. So it's built up entire code for a solution, and if a student was to submit that, looking at it, and so it's a good solution. And if I was to ask a student, can you explain it? If they'd read the narrative description at the end, it tells them what the code is doing. So without learning to program, you can now generate full solutions. Now you want to do database programming, run SQL program statement to find all the people living in a database living in Hull. So this is kind of thing we might ask in a simple test, a quiz between the first year for SQL databases, since students understand the simple SQL statements. That tells you, again, the answer is very simple. This one, select everything from a table of people where the city is Hull. And it tells you what that's using, the select from and from clauses. And it tells you about the column of data it's using in city, and which rows it returns from the people table. So it explains the answer in a way which, again, would probably satisfy many school, college, and say early university, simple questions on databases. If in a more complex question, it will answer that too. So those lines were all for ChatGPT. So they can be positive. They can help people programmers block. I know colleagues have been using ChatGPT themselves as a way, if you want to write something new, thinking things like to maybe some teaching resources, grants applications, solving a coding problem, ask ChatGPT, and it'll give you a starting point. At that point, you acknowledge the source and be aware that it lends it elsewhere. It might be academic or other solutions. Also think about that if you tell it answers, you could be breaching IPR. So if you use these answers, it gives you, I don't know where that code came from, the single statement, that's so quite generic. For more detailed inverse method, that may be verbatim from a solution it found on Reddit. Equally, the Python code may be a solution it's found elsewhere. So how far they're new, or how far it's simply copying somebody's IPR is the challenge. So one of the queries is, how can we use that in assessments? Well, think about ways that we devise assessments that still require student input. So think about iterative applied assignments rather than a simple big one, where we look at the process. So we see students developing it over time. They can actually provide an answer. Think about the show me, tell me element. So students who are using it have got to learn from it to explain their work. Again, as I say, like the kind of paired programmer approach. And think about frameworks, limitations and requirements, which will make it hard for an AI system to simply answer it. The idea here is to minimize kind of bookwork, fact regurgitation, because that's something where these systems are now very good. They've built on the kind of things we had from the search engines, from the internet, simply things that can now generate convincing free text. The challenges these systems do create, so these are a few examples of these. I've got a few of these, just a few recent articles. So is it ethical? This was a interview that was generated in the magazine. It was published. It was an interview it claimed with Michael Schumacher. It turns out he hadn't broken his period of silence. His family were very upset by this because it all generated by a foundational AI system. Once it was announced where it came from, they sacked the editor over that use. So the question is, are these things ethical? Is it biased? So learning from a lot of data, but much of that data we're using is very much dominated by certain countries. Again, the internet is still dominated by a lot of content from the US, from Western Europe, English language in particular, and thus you end up with very biased data sets potentially. So World Health Organization is concerned about the fact that we maybe create systems which have built-in bias and misinformation because of where they're coming from. And if you start to build healthcare systems, other solutions, we could be implicitly building in the sort of bias which has been implicit in other systems for years. How to train data? Say, we could reach an IPR. You may find that you build a solution building one of your systems, and it gets pulled because it turns out that data itself wasn't used appropriately. So one of the image generators, Stability AI, they're currently being sued by Getty Images because they're concerned that it used their images from internet for training it, and they hadn't given permission for that. Equally, if putting things into it, are you releasing your own secrets? I've got colleagues who be talking about doing grant applications through ChatGPT. I do warn them, well, if you do that, ChatGPT is learning your answers. If you put your exam questions into it, it's learning your exam questions. If we start training it with our own questions based on facts, we are giving it our facts. And again, several companies now are banning that because of the danger of data leaks. And Samsung found that. Many programming companies are banning staff from using things like Copilot and IntelliSense because of the fact that they're building solutions then with code from other people. And that it means that when we try and sell their software, they could be sued because of the content. Equally, it could be wrong. So these systems have a tendency to give convincing but wrong answers at times. They sometimes hallucinate. Again, that can cause other problems, even legal ones. So again, in Australia, there's a mayor who was looking to sue ChatGPT because of showing false claims about him. It combined several true news facts, which some did mention him, but not in the context of what it claimed. And when it claimed he'd been in prison, and he hadn't, he's now looking at suing that. So the facts can be wrong. And equally, are we at the singularity point or close to it? That idea that AI can lead to the end of humanity. So I think we're a long way from that myself, but you can't say it's zero probability. So these tools have got us lots of new facilities. They can help us generate code. They're useful in software engineering, education in particular, and education in general. Obviously, some of that in the next talk as well. What we need to think about is how we teach and how we assess. Focus on these sort of human level skills and be aware of these possibilities and dangers. And I thought just to finish on that, just to give you an idea of it. So as we started this session, ask ChatGPT to say, how could it help in programming education? And again, it's going to be a nice answer in terms of it can answer questions and provide explanations. It can debug. It can do code completion and suggestions. And ChatGPT can have code optimization. If you give it some algorithms and practices that you wanted to use, it will look at your code and suggest how to improve it. It can help in project guidance and feedback, give interactive learning, and personalized learning. So I've been working on for a decade, but didn't expect computers to tell me that's what it will now do. And use natural language. And equally, in some dissertation, explain problems with ChatGPT. So here's a nice answer it's given me in 2 seconds in terms of a title, potential challenges utilizing ChatGPT for programming and problem solving. And it analyzes ChatGPT and gives you some of the visual objectives methodology. The fact it may have a lack of contextual understanding, as we said earlier, ambiguities in what we might be asking it to do, and it can't handle ambiguity. It might produce multiple conflicting solutions. So this is an answer that ChatGPT has given us on why we perhaps shouldn't use it, or at least we shouldn't use it with care. And so if you want to join that chat, I will share that in our chat. And at that point, you have about 5 minutes for Q&A, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Really,